But before we begin with any further analysis, it's important to discuss these two key concepts, the short run and the long run. First, let's focus on the short run time period and the short run production function. The short run is basically a period of time when production can be increased only by increasing the application of variable factors. Fixed factors, by definition, remains constant. To elaborate further, once a plant of a particular production capacity is installed, it cannot be changed in the short period. Let's take the case of the pizza shop. In the short run of say a few months, Rohit cannot change the factors like land or the machines since they cost too much and require a lot of planning. The short period is too short to change it. On the other hand, labor, that is his workers, is a variable factor and he adjusts that in the short run as required. When one factor is a fixed factor and the other is a variable factor, production function can be written like this. Qx is a function of L and K bar. Here, Qx is the output of good X, L is labor, a variable factor, and K bar indicates capital, a fixed factor. In this type of production function, output can be increased only by increasing the application of L, the variable factor. The following equation can be used to illustrate this point. Let's say 40x is a function of 5L and 4K, and 45x is a function of 6L and 4K. What has happened here? We find that K is constant at 4 units of capital. However, output increases from 40 to 45 units of pizza, that is commodity X. Why? Because input of L has increased from 5 to 6 units. That is, one more worker was hired. Since K is constant and only L changes, the ratio or the proportion between L and K has changed as well. This in turn generates the law of variable proportions, which we'll discuss a bit later. Now, let's turn to the long run time period and the long run production function. The long run is a period of time that is long enough that the distinction between fixed factors and variable factors vanishes. All factors are variable factors in the long run because given enough time, all factors of production can be varied. A firm, in order to produce at different levels of output in the long run, may vary both or all the inputs simultaneously. So in the long run, there is no fixed input. For any particular production process, long run generally refers to a longer time period than the short run. For different production processes, the long run periods may be different. It is not advisable to define short run and long run in terms of say days, months or years. We define a period as long run or short run simply by looking at whether all the inputs can be varied or not. So let's take some of our producers and see what short run and long run means for them. For Chandra, fixed factors are land and capital, like the number of tractors he has. Variable factors are labor and some of the resources like electricity, water, etc. In the short run of 6 months to 1 year, he can't change the fixed factors. But over a couple of years or so, he can take loans, buy new tractors, etc. and even buy new land in case there's a lot of demand for wheat and he wants to increase production. For Rohit again, fixed factors are land and capital like his equipments. Variable factors are labor and some of the resources like electricity, water, raw materials, etc. However, for Rohit, the long run might be shorter since he can change his fixed factors maybe within a shorter span of 6 months or so by renting a new shop and buying more capital by taking loans so as to increase his production. For Shyam also, fixed factors are land and capital like his machines. For him, long run might again be more than a year since it would take a lot of effort and time to set up a new factory since it is complicated to do so. So as we can see, long run and short run are relative and depends on the type of production under consideration. Overall, the long run is a period that is long enough to increase production capacity of a firm. The plant size can be changed, more and more plants can be installed, etc. in the long run. Thus, what is a fixed factor during the short period becomes the variable factor over the long period. When both the factors are variable, the long run production function can be written like this. Qx is a function of L and K. Note that here K is not indicated by K bar. Like L, it's a variable factor now. Let's say 40x is a function of 5L and 4K and 80x is a function of 10L and 8K. Since L and K are variable factors, output here is increased from 40 to 80 by increasing the input of both the factors. In fact, by doubling both the factors. Let us now look at three main differences between the short-run production function and the long-run production function. The first difference is that the short-run production function is a variable proportions type production function, while the long-run production function is a constant proportions type production function. In the short-run production function, the factor ratio L is to K must change at different levels of output. This is because one factor is constant all through the production process. Thus, K equal to 4 when 5 units of labor are applied to produce 40 units of output, or when 6 units of labor are applied to produce 45 units of output. Accordingly, the factor ratio shifts from 5:4 to 6:4 as the level of output is raised from 40 to 45 units of the commodity. In the long-run production function, on the other hand, the factor ratio remains constant. It is 5:4 when output equal to 40 units and 10:8, which is the same as 5:4 when output becomes 80 units. Thus, while short-run production function is normally a variable proportions type production function, the long-run production function is a constant proportions type production function. Let's see a diagrammatic illustration of constant factor ratio in the case of long-run production function and variable factor ratio in the case of short-run production function. In the first figure here, K1L1 by OL1 is equal to K2L2 by OL2 because OL1K1 and OL2K2 are similar triangles. Now here, K1L1 is the units of capital for a lower level of output. K2L2 is the units of capital for a higher level of output. OL1 is the units of labor for a lower level of output, and OL2 is the units of labor for a higher level of output. So in this figure, we can see that both the factors are increasing over time and we get a figure like this. In the second figure, a horizontal straight line Kn starting from the point K on y-axis shows that capital remains fixed at OK units. Higher levels of output is achieved only by increasing the input of labor from OL1 to OL2. Accordingly, factor ratio must change as the level of output changes. The second major difference is that the scale of output is constant in the case of short-run production function, while it changes in case of the long-run production function. Scale of output is indicated by the size of the plant used by the firm. By definition, the short run is too short for the firm to change the fixed factor or the size of the plant. Accordingly, the short run production function is always studied with reference to constant scale of output. Thus, in the short run, the producer increases the level of his output only by increasing the application of the variable factor, sticking to the same scale of output or the same plan of production. In the long run, on the other hand, the producer increases the level of output by increasing the scale of output, by increasing the number of plants or by shifting from a smaller factory to a bigger factory, etc. Thus, the short-run production function is studied with reference to a constant scale of output, while long-run production function is studied with reference to a variable scale of output. The difference 3 is that short-run production function exhibits returns to a factor, while the long-run production function exhibits returns to scale. During the short run, output, as we know, is increased by increasing the application of the variable factor. Accordingly, the behavior of the output in response to the increasing application of the variable factor is studied as returns to a factor. During the long run, output is increased by increasing the scale of production. Accordingly, the behavior of output in response to the expanding scale is studied as returns to scale. Thus, returns to a factor is a short period concept or a short run concept, and returns to scale, on the other hand, is a long run concept. We can now wind up the discussion relating to short run and long run production function by highlighting the following points of contrast between the two concepts, as you can see here. Now, one thing to note here, our syllabus prescribes the study of returns to factor and not returns to scale, even though both are essential parts of discussing the production process. So we will also focus more on a detailed examination of returns to factor, but we will also study the returns to scale concepts, also briefly, because it is a useful tool for the economic detective to have.